Okay, now that everyone's comfortable, we will kick off. So I'm delighted to invite our next presenter, Miho Kondo, who is from the Meat and Livestock Australia. She is their Senior Manager Market Specialist for Japan, and Miho's role is to implement a range of trade and strategic initiatives for the Japanese market and acts as a bridging gap between the Australian and Japanese business environment. So she's going to present to us a perspective on the Australian red meat industry and what are some of those opportunities and challenges that are arising in that industry for Australia into Asia. So please come forward, Miho. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's okay. And my name is Miho Kondo from Meat and Livestock Australia. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the Australian red meat industry and the opportunities in Asia. And I was very pleased to hear our presentation earlier today, Peter and Harold. That was really interesting. And also, there are lots of synergies with their presentation and what I'm going to talk about today. So, when we say Asia, there are many countries and food cultures in Asia, of course. So even when we send our beef to Asia, it can be enjoyed as a steak or curry, hot pot, yakiniku, satay, gyudon, hamburg, anything. Also, we are talking about very different bunch of people in Asia. Also, the definition of Asia itself varies depending on the circumstances. So in my short presentation today, I would like to focus on beef and export overview and current export trend. And in terms of countries, I'd like to cover China, of course, and Indonesia and Japan. And also, I like to keep this last question, that is sending product enough for Australia. But first, I'd like to talk to you about briefly talk about Meat and Livestock Australia. I know many of you are aware what we do, but MLA is a producer company owned by the Australian cattle, sheep, and goat producers. And we provide marketing and research programs for the industry. I know many of you are aware of what we do, but may I point out that companies like ourselves are quite unique or seen unique in the Asian countries. And we're seen as a conduit between the commercial customers in the market and Australian industry and government in the market. So I'd like to start looking at the global perspective of the Australian beef industry by finding where we are in the global beef scene. Australia, in fact, is not a large cattle holder in the world, as you can see from this graph. And also, we are very small in terms of beef production compared to other major beef producers in the world. However, we are a major beef exporter in the world, as we export about 2/3 of total beef production. And while the Australian domestic market is the largest and most important market, it is the emerging markets that hold the future of our industry. This also means that Australia beef industry has many challenges, both internal and external. Extreme weather conditions and increasing costs are major challenges for any producers in the world. But on top of that, Australian beef trade is very much influenced by what's happening in the other side of the globe. So before we getting into these details and changing nature of our beef trade, I'd like to quickly look at the current status of the industry. So in comparison with last year, the Australian cattle herd is estimated to have declined about 9% this year to 26.7 million head this year. but still it is quite relatively large. The reduction is due to very dry and tough condition, the weather condition, and subsequent increase in slaughter. The high slaughter led to record beef production in 2013, and we expect beef production volume in 2014 to be relatively high again. Subsequently, we anticipate a reduced cattle herd, tighter supply, then stronger export prices in 2015, while demand for our beef from other export markets likely to remain very strong. So this map shows where our products are sent in 2013. We can clearly see the global spread of Australian beef with heavy focus in Asia. So let's put this into a historical context and have a closer look at changes we witnessed in recent years. This is a breakdown of our beef export by destination in year 2000. As you can see, that 83% of the exports were sent to three major markets, namely Japan, US, and Korea. And what we call other market took only 17 of total shipments. Now, we forward the clock by 13 years and look at the growth of other markets. It took over 40% of total exports in 2013. So in volume terms, the export to these other markets grew by 195% in 13 years to 451,000 tons, exceeding the total of Japan and Korea put together. So this major market in this other is, of course, China, Indonesia, Taiwan, as well as many other smaller but emerging destinations. So I'd like to look at key drivers of this growth and the factors that underpin Australian beef trade today. So as I said earlier, I would like to focus on China and Indonesia as emerging markets, as well as Japan as an established trading partner. So, Australia is one of many beef-producing countries in the world. And as a trusted supplier, Australia is proud of a very integrated production system. We have high reputation for being clean and green, as Peter and Harold said earlier. And animal grown in a natural and safe environment produce excellent eating quality protein. We also have strong partnership between the industry and government, and together we ensure the product we produce is safe, wholesome, and meet expectations and requirements of overseas customers. One of this evidence is the cattle traceability system, known as National Livestock Identification System. Also, again, as Harold said, we are ideally located to meet demand from key growth markets, namely China and Indonesia. So these are the strengths we have in our sector, but exports are, of course, as we said earlier, very much influenced by what is happening in the receiving end. So besides the supply factors we just looked at, we have economic and population growth, demand for modern diet, and in-country production status can very much influence our trade either positively or negatively. On top of that, we have challenges with the currency movements, competition with other beef suppliers, and decline in demand due to unexpected incidents such as disease outbreak or natural disasters or large-scale economic events such as global financial crisis. So let's look at these key factors, but more closely by country. So China is now the third largest export market for Australian beef. And as you can see from this graph, the growth happened really quickly in the last 2 years. China is still very much of a combination of tradition and modern, with 1.3 billion people going through amazing transformation every day. Many people used to live and work in the rural agricultural area, are now working for businesses, manufacturing and processing in the cities, resulting in the fast urbanization. And there's a growing need for quick and convenient and nutritious food for time-poor city workers. It is also the world's fastest growth market for luxury good items. And they have a consumption growth to support the income growth to support such appetite for consumption. The country is also going through industrial issues such as massive pollution in the cities and food safety concerns are very, very high than ever. So this very first growth of Australian beef export to China was supported by all these key factors, and we seem to have provided exactly the type of the products they needed. But of course, complacency is our enemy. We need to continue investing our efforts in reinforcing the relationship and monitoring key trends that may affect their appetite for our products. Also, it is a huge country with diverse portfolio of people, region, cities, eating preferences, and complex supply chain and mixed economic status. So that's what we call one country, many markets. And of course, the progress on the Australia-China FTA will certainly help our trade to be more competitive against other competitors, such as New Zealand, who already got the FTA in place. So I'd like to move on to Indonesia. Like Brazil, but unlike China and India, Indonesia owes much of its success to a commodity boom. Coal and gas goes to China and India, and palm oil to the world. So much money is pouring into the country at the moment. With a population of 240 million people, Indonesia is expected to hold a large middle class. They have already got the middle class people, but by 2030, they expect this middle class people to grow to 135 million. Even now, Indonesia's consumer confidence index is very, very high, and this provides a huge opportunity for Australian food industries. Yet Indonesia remains as a bit of a mystery country, and with old and new combined, like in China. And in many respects, it's a hard country to do business in. Its infrastructure is regarded very challenging, especially in the area of port service, power supply, and road quality. The red meat consumption in Indonesia is ranked as the lowest in Southeast Asia at approximately 2 kilos per person per year. And due to its cheap price, much of the meat consumption growth in Indonesia has been mostly captured by poultry consumption. In terms of beef and domestic beef production, the volume surged in 2011 to 2013, driven by the government's self-sufficiency policy. But 2 years of excessive slaughter has resulted in the reduction of the cattle herd, and subsequently local beef price in 2014 became very high. According to estimate by NZ Bank, if Indonesia continued its self-sufficiency policy, the cattle herd in Indonesia would have almost vanished entirely by 2021. So assisted by the high price and tight supply of local cattle and beef, Australian exports to Indonesia in 2014 are forecast to increase 34% year-on-year to record high 53,000 tons. The growth in demand for beef is in part facilitated by the expansion of Indonesia's modern retail and food service sector. We hear that beef dishes are very, very popular among Indonesian consumers. So these are the key trends we see in Indonesia. And demand for Australian boxed beef and live cattle are expected to remain very strong, supported by these key factors. Yet we continue to monitor the development and competitions, of course, and how these changes may affect our trade with this very important and unique market. So we looked at the most important emerging markets for Australia, China, and Indonesia. But how about established markets? How about Japan? Yes, lots of people, including myself, of course, from Japan. Well, all we know Japan well. And I would like to show you a couple of the very typical images of Japan as we see it. Falling is very common in Japan, and disease and cleanness is very also important in Japan. And of course, you see all these crazy kids on TV and crazy fashion. And also, this is they do have really amazing toilets in Japan. I've been living in Australia for 18 years now, and every time I go back there, they have something new, and it's almost scary. It looks like a spaceship. And but a bit of a fascination with how to be clean, but how to be also very comfortable in that private space. Anyway, so that's a bit of curious and interesting sides of Japan. But here are some more serious, a bit more, bit boring maybe, but about beef trade with Japan. So there are lots of words in here, but in short, Japan has been the top export market for Australia for over 20 years, and remains as a critically important market for our high-value products. And our beef, Australian beef, supports 1/3 of Japanese total beef consumption. So Australian beef is particularly indispensable in the Japanese manufacturing, fast food, casual eatery, and everyday retail sector. At the same time, as we saw earlier, the international demand for Australian beef is so great, and that will continue to influence our exports to Japan. On the market access, we had a major breakthrough with Japan-Australia Economic Partnership Agreement this year. And the expectation is that the agreement and the reduction in beef import tariff would create more opportunities for Australian beef in Japan. In fact, Australia was the first country to that reached a comprehensive trade agreement with agricultural items in place with Japan. US hasn't got one, although they are negotiating a Trans-Pacific Partnership, which also Australia is also a member of. So let's look at a bit more closer details of the export to Japan. Our volume to Japan, or beef export volume to Japan, surged since 2004 after US had BSE outbreak in 2003. And banned from the market. But then US beef, or the US returned to the market in 2006, and the competition in the market increased since. As you can see from this chart, there's a gradual return of US beef into the market. But it's not just US beef that Australian beef is facing competition with. In comparison with year 2000, which beef consumption peaked, when the beef consumption peaked in Japan, the consumption of imported beef declined. As you can, yep. So compared to 2000, the ratio or proportion of imported beef consumption out of total beef consumption declined from 16 to 11. But then when you look at chicken consumption, it increased from 35 to 43%. So total meat consumption in Japan is expected to remain steady or slightly decline in the future due to the aging population, and also the total number of population is slightly declining. So shall we not to worry about Japan and focus on emerging markets such as China and Indonesia and other important markets? Well, of course, I would like to say no, because it is still a very big market. I just want to give you a bit of examples. So this picture is a section of Shinjuku Station in Tokyo, and this station is used by 750,000 people every day. So that's the equivalent of population of whole Tasmania and Northern Territory put together. And population of Canberra in Australia is 390,000 people. And there are 5 train stations in Tokyo that are used by over 400,000 people every day. And of course, Japan remains as a very high-value products market for Australia. And also, Japanese companies are very active in the global market these days because they see the opportunities in the China, Indonesia, and other sort of emerging markets, and they like to expand their business into those countries. So it's not just Japan within Japan, but then Japan Inc., what we call, these corporates are very, very active in the global markets. And of course, they have very deep appreciation of beef because they have got this beautiful Wagyu beef tradition. I was told that there were more than 300 Wagyu brands in nationwide, each claiming high quality and unique flavor. So these are the key items or key trends that we'd like to monitor with Japan. And although it was really quickly, we went through China, Indonesia, and Japan on trend issues and opportunities we face in each market as we trade our beef with these countries. But the question remains, is producing high quality and products and sending them to overseas, is that good enough for Australia? Earlier, we looked at these key factors and what influences our trade with overseas. But there's one more important layer that I would like to incorporate, and that is market access, brand marketing, and rapport with international producers. As we already discussed, access conditions such as free trade agreement, economic partnership agreement, or TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, significantly influences our position in the export market. Lower the import tariffs, more competitive we can become. But at the same time, such change may cause conflicts with local producers. So it is very important for Australia to become competitive as well as maintaining good relationship with consumers and producers in the market. Harold talked about the branding and Australia's branding effort, marketing effort earlier in his presentation, and I totally agree with you. On branding, consumers want to know stories behind products, how it is made, who made it, what's in there and is it safe. So Asian consumers are no different from Australian consumers, and if any, even more so, they are curious about all these interesting stories or important stories. Because when it comes to imported product for Asian consumers, they didn't make it themselves. So of course they want to know what's in there. Besides quality assurance, the integrity and all that sort of things, building good stories and telling them in an effective and smart and romantic manner gives your product more personality that appeals to the consumers. In terms of Australian beef industry, we recently launched a new international branding strategy, united under this True Aussie logo. This is a logo to identify country of origin, but also to create dialogue with the consumers in international market to communicate the positive attributes and stories of Australian beef and sheep meat to internationally. So the next one and the last one I wanted to talk about is the rapport with producers. Now you may think this is a little bit out of place, but let me explain how this started. As many of you recall, the earthquake and tsunami and nuclear accidents in Japan in March 2011 was truly shocking events and incidents for many people. Among many families and regions devastated by the disaster, there were cattle producers and their rural communities. So in an attempt to assist them and demonstrate our support to Japan, the Australian red meat industry started, together with Japan, disaster relief program. And we conducted a fundraising barbecue in Sydney in May 2011 and raised a fund to support these people, especially in the area of northern Japan, where the tsunami and nuclear accident was very much left really big devastation. This program received very strong support from both Japan and Australia, and delivered our next project, which is to focus on young cattle producers in Australia and in Japan. We call this producer project P2P, or producer to producer, and kicked off with young Japanese producers from Fukushima. As you know, the Fukushima is where the industry was deeply affected by the nuclear accidents. So these young producers, cattle producers from Fukushima, visited Australia and gained understanding of our beef production by visiting their farms and talking to people. This was also an opportunity for them to understand issues and challenges we face in Australia, including the aging farming population, increasing cost, and dealing with extreme weather. This is one of wonderful comments we received from P2P or producer-to-producer participants from Japan. He said this comment not because he thought his beef was better, but because he understood the difference between the type of beef he produced and type of beef we produce in Australia, and recognized his own strengths by looking at something completely different from what he does in Japan. So we continued this journey, and in 2013, we sent Australian producers to Japan so that they can see how the beef they produced are consumed in Japan and look into issues that their counterparts in Japan are facing these days. With Australia-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement and TPP and other free trade discussions, debates around the bilateral status tend to focus on competition, but not much to do with the actual issues that producers in each country are facing. And government-level discussion may not fully capture that sort of everyday facts happening in the rural communities. So we thought let's start the dialogue by this P2P project and provide a chance to get together, eat beef together, and openly discuss anything that comes up in their mind. And hopefully that would start the conversation and understanding, and maybe the opportunity for collaboration between the Australian and Japanese producers. So as I said earlier, competition is not really beef among themselves, but it's more about with pork and chicken and other things that consumers want to spend money on. So why not international cattle producers get together and more come up with good ideas on how to grow beef consumption together? So that is still the end of my presentation today. But in summary, I'd like to revisit that Australia is, yes, global producer, but then demand landscape is changing very quickly. We have great, the world-class product integrity, but on top of that, we need to work on market access, branding, and rapport with international producers. And thank you very much for listening today.
That was wonderful insight into some of those countries and their market needs, I suppose. I open the floor to some questions. Has anyone got some questions for Miho?
Andrew Hindmarsh here from Marcus. I was just wondering, what's the story with lamb? You know,
Yes.
they don't want it, or we don't have enough of it, or... Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Apologies first that I didn't really talk about lamb today because I just didn't want to go everywhere. But lamb is, of course, very, very important part of our business, and lamb export or the sheep meat export to the world growing very quickly too. The key market, China, of course, growing really quickly. As much as beef exports, we are seeing that huge growth. Southeast Asia as well. US market quite strong too. With Japan, yes, there's a dish called Genghis Khan. It's like a barbecue, sliced up barbecue, like a yakiniku style, but a little bit different, mainly eaten in Hokkaido. That is going quite well. The concern is the strong price, of course. Japan is still recovering from its economic slowdown the last couple of years, and of course the earthquake and everything. So this year, I think the export of lamb to Japan has been increasing about 30% or more, but many importers are sort of concerned about the upcoming strong prices because of this global demand, as well as maybe tighter supply in the future.
Any more questions?
Thank you, Miho, for your very interesting talk. Simon Faulkner, I'm a seed stock producer in this Geelong region. My question stems from your slide that showed the 100 bows per day in Japan.
Yes.
We often have Japanese and Chinese guests visit us, and we're always thinking, there's potential for developing a relationship.
Yes.
Could you give us some tips on how we should approach Japanese or Chinese people visiting us, because they come from a more formal way of doing business than us rough and ready Aussies. Are there any tips out there that we should follow? Do we need to bow or be immaculately clean, or have little simple things like have the ute clean when we're carting people around? Have we got some, just some simple tips?
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for your warm thought about the protocol, because as you said, it's very important. At the same time, as you say in English, when you're in Rome, not the Romans do. So they are pretty, I think they understand that too. In terms of the Japanese protocol, and this might be a little bit similar in the Chinese protocol too, but I think when they're here, they like to sort of follow the protocol here as well. So you can do handshake first or business card first, either way. And in terms of the sort of calling the names of people, which I think sometimes people get confused and some funny situation may happen. The Japanese Mr., Miss, Ms., everything else can be san. So I can be Miho-san, or I can be Kondo-san, or Harold can be Harold-san, or Harold can be Sim-san. So which is very, very easy. But never call people just Kondo. No, you can call me Miho, but then just calling surname is not a very good idea. So if you do that and make sure you do what you think is best and ask them a question if they like to do something, I think that's pretty right. Yes. Sorry, just one thing. I often go to these visit farms and places in Australia with Japanese delegation, and people are so nice, and that's why they're so nice that they try to offer them Japanese sake, or try to offer them some rice. But that's almost like you go to Japan and then so those people are so welcoming and they try to offer you a glass of wine from Casco. No, it could be because they are here, they want to enjoy the experience here. So please don't go overboard and then try and buy some sake from local shop. Please offer them Australian beer and beautiful wine that we have here.
Thank you. Miho, we've got a question over here from Ian.
Ian Blair again. Could you comment about any of the other meats like goat's meat or some of the other kangaroo, things that we can also produce here? Is there a growing demand of that?
Okay. Thank you. The goat meat, yes, MLA covers goat, of course, as well. And it's a strong demand from Malaysia and from the other Southeast Asian countries as well. With Japan, Okinawa, which is the southern island of Japan, they've been tradition of eating goat meat, and we got small shipments being sent to goat meat. And when the prices of the sheep meat and beef getting very, very strong, there are some markets that try and alternate in the substitute their protein need with the goat meat, and also it's I think the known as a very lean and health. Many people regard that's really healthy meat. So we believe there are opportunities, but just at the moment, because there was no tradition of eating goat meat in many some of the Asian countries, I think we have to work on the getting them used to the eating goat meat as well. In terms of kangaroo, we don't look after kangaroo, so I'm not quite sure. But I have seen kangaroo being sent, talked as very organic and healthy meat. So I'm sure there are opportunities. At the same time, I think it's important to make sure the meat safety side of the products, because anything we send, we don't want one product to tarnish reputation of our product that we're already sending to other countries. Yes.
I've got a question up the back for Will. Do you want to stand up and yell it out?
Just a quick one, stemming from your statement that just sending product is not enough. Mm-hmm. Totally agree with that. Outlined by Harold, we're trying to do more on that front. Mm-hmm. Just a quick question on the perspective of the Asian countries as a holder of live export licence mm-hmm. on live export cattle as against beef product, mm-hmm. and what effect that perspective has on the trade agreements that we're trying to push at the moment.
We're talking about specific trade agreement with a specific country or in general?
Well, just in general, mm-hmm. I think time for specifics here, mm-hmm. but in particular, I know Japan's concentrated on beef product. But there was a lot of cattle obviously going into China, and there's a lot more interest, and there's a lot of mm-hmm. build-up of that live cattle product. Mm-hmm. Same political implications in Indonesia, mm-hmm. causing huge issues with mm-hmm. the industry in general. Mm-hmm. Just wondering about the perspective of the Asian country mm-hmm. on that particular, obviously, two different product.
Okay. Okay. First of all, I don't directly look after live exports, so I shouldn't really talk on their behalf, but just to talk about what I know and what I think in these circumstances. That the first and most important thing here is for Australia to stick with a protocol, which is ESCAS, Exporters System. I'm not sure, so I'm sorry. I don't know the full name, but ESCAS is a protocol and a rule that we established after the Indonesian incident in 2011 that we must obey and we must follow to ensure the animal welfare of the Australian cattle and sheep being sent to overseas market. So that's one most important thing I can assure you here. And after that, I think there are different rules and protocols placed in different countries, and of course different preference that each country has in terms of the consumer preference or religion or regulation there or type of animal. So I think the important thing is to stick with what we decided that we are going to do with the animal welfare, but also respect the what they like with their animal preferences and try and meet their demand with the regulation intact. With the Japanese market, there's a bit of up and down demand with Japan. It's not a huge live export market, but when the cattle, the calf price is very high in Japan, there are more interest in Australian cattle from Japan because of this safe and healthy environment, and also very, very healthy cattle that we are known from those markets. So I'm sorry, I might not be very enough for your question, but that's all I'd like to say at the moment, if that's okay.
Thank you, Miho. Well, I might take this moment to close Miho's presentation and thank you for it. It was wonderful.